In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, the episode is a little different because you might hear some strange sounds in the background. And if you hear strange sounds, it is because I am actually on a safari in Kenya, but the work doesn't stop. So that's why I'm still going to do Mailbox Monday while I am in a safari. So if you hear, like I said, some crazy noise in the background, it is the hippos, the hyenas, whatever animal is near my tent. I'm recording in a tent. But anyway, this is Mailbox Monday, and I'm going to answer your 2024 NBA draft questions. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board and the founder of NBA Draft Junkies. Before I get into this episode, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. It is the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you have to do is go to PrizePicks.com, use the code LOCKEDONNBA. It has to be lowercase. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you can get a first deposit match up to $100. All right, like I said in the open, I am here in Kenya. I'm at the Masai Mara, I don't even know the exact word, but I've been on a safari for the last 2 days. An absolute amazing experience. You can see some of the pictures that I've posted. I mean, I've seen giraffes. I mean, I was like just a few feet away from a lion on a couple occasions. I've seen, like I said, zebras, buffaloes. I mean, it's been just an amazing experience. I'm actually kind of speechless talking about it. Today, we went looking for cheetahs and leopards, but we're not able to find them. And like I mentioned, I'm sleeping in a tent. Didn't get much sleep last night because the Mara River is probably 50 yards away from me, and there are hippos. And I guess hippos just like to make a lot of noise in the middle of the night. It actually scared me a few times. And then there's hyenas. I think a hyena ran into the tent. I was a little scared, a little shook for a second, but I mean, this is what happens when you are out in nature. But anyway, I'll let you know why I'm in Kenya. I'm in Kenya because I'm helping out with a project. It's called Nurturing Potential, where a friend of mine is looking to help kids from underprivileged parts of Africa get an education. Some of it is just from an education standpoint. Some of it is through sports. And the goal is to allow these kids to have an opportunity to give, and then that they end up giving back to where they came from. So if a kid goes to the United States on a scholarship and ends up at a 4-year institution, if he goes to the States in high school, ends up at a 4-year college, gets a degree, so on, we want to teach him the importance of giving back to his community and reaching back and finding another young man or woman like him or her, and then helping them out. And then, of course, my relationship is on the basketball side, so we're looking for prospects that can possibly go to like some high schools. College would be ideal, and then if a player makes it to the NBA, that would be the perfect situation. But the main focus is definitely just giving the kids an opportunity that they may not have here in Africa, and then teaching them the importance of giving back. And at the camp that I went to, I found a kid that was pretty intriguing, 7'3", and he just started playing basketball, 13 years old, very raw, but has some potential. Ball handling wasn't hard for him, and even could shoot threes. I saw him make three-pointers in a row. But yeah, 7'3" at 13 years old, who's coordinated, he can run, has the upside to become a shooter and ball handler. I mean, he was fluid. The way that he was handling the ball, I mean, I wouldn't say that he had a tight handle, but he wasn't patting the ball. It didn't look like he didn't know what he was doing. And pretty fast progression for a kid that just started playing this year. So hopefully I found one. I mean, that would be great. jokingly said I'm going to find the next Wembanyama or Siakam or just that there's another outlier athlete from the continent of Africa. And then there's a kid, he's from Africa somewhere, and he played Spain, he's 12 years old. He went viral this weekend. But anyway, let's get to your draft questions. All right, the first question that was presented to me was about Izan Almansa from the G League Ignite. And the question reads, did Izan Almansa make a mistake by going to the Ignite, or is he just not playing well? That's a tough one. I mean, he's not playing well. He's averaging 7 points per game. He's only making 45% of his free throws. He was someone that I talked about extensively leading up to the season. I had some concerns about him, and then I kind of wavered on those concerns after I watched him play at the Ignite Fall Showcase. But the one big concern I have for him was, how does he look when he doesn't have the really good Spanish point guards feeding him the ball? I mean, he won 3 MVPs representing Spain the last couple of summers, and he was in an ideal situation where he played with really good guards that get him the ball. And I mean, Spanish point guards are just gifted passers and playmakers. They play unselfish, and they just knew how to find him in his spots. He has amazing touch around the rim, and I just wanted to see how he would look without that situation. And the Ignite is a team that I wouldn't say is loaded with playmakers. I mean, if David Stockton, who's the son of John Stockton, is out, and Jeremy Pargo, their 2 veterans, are out, which has been the case, you don't really have a point guard that's going to be able to find him on those roles. So he's going to have to get his points on just energy and effort. And so there's a saying that me and my brother have, is like, there's guys that know how to hoop, and there's guys that know how to play basketball. And when you're on a bad team, you have to know how to hoop. And Almansa knows how to play basketball. He is at best in structure. And not saying the Ignite don't have structure, but when they're, I mean, they won a couple games, but if they're down 20, Almansa's not a guy that's going to say, well, I need to go get my points. I need to, get my numbers up. He's still going to try to make all the right reads. So the fit is a little clunky for me, but he has to do a better job of making free throws and showing that he has range. One of the concerns is that he's somewhat of a tweener, even though tweener's not necessarily seen as a negative as it was in years past, but he's not really strong enough and doesn't have like ideal athleticism to be like a vertical lob threat or a 5 in my opinion, and he doesn't space the floor well enough, or doesn't space the floor at all, to where he can be a 4. So I think he's stuck in between being a 4 and a 5, and to me that's just very difficult to evaluate a guy like that, considering the situation that he's in. I still think he's a first-round pick, but to answer your question, I know that was a long-winded answer. I do think that his draft stock has probably decreased compared to what it was coming into the season. And just to piggyback on that and kind of take it in another direction, I know this isn't the question, but I feel the same way about Aday Mara. Aday Mara is at UCLA, who was Almansa's teammate on the Spanish national team, and Mara hasn't gotten off to the start that many expected. A lot of people were high on him. I was a little bit reserved on him, and right now he's only averaging 5 points per game and 14 minutes per game. I didn't like the fit at UCLA personally. I thought that he played the same position as a Dembona. I knew a Dembona was going to play, so I don't know how you can play both of those guys on the floor together. I guess maybe in theory if Mara was spacing the floor, but I think he's at his best around the rim and as a passer. So anyway, with that being said, I think that it's going to be looked at a lot of how those two guys' season, I'm talking about Almansa and Mara, how much it impacts international players, high-level international players coming to the States, whether it's to play for the Ignite, Overtime Elite, or in college, because you can say that their draft stock has kind of fell since they made that move. And for Mara, if the situation doesn't work out and he continues to average 5 points a game and 14 minutes per game, then I think it's going to be a tough sell for the best prospects in Europe to come over here and play college ball. You have the situation with at Kentucky with Zvonimir Ivisic. He's not playing. You have another situation to where Jan Vide is I mean, he wasn't projected to be a one and done by everyone. But anyway, with that being said, you look at Nikola Topic, who stayed in Europe, and his draft stock has skyrocketed. So I think it could be a situation where teams in Europe are going to say, why go to the States when if you would have stayed here, you've seen Nikola Topic turn into a projected top 10 pick. But then on the flip side, the players can get NIL, like huge NIL deals that are significantly more than what they would make in Europe, and then they would also be able to play. So I think that's an interesting dynamic. So to answer your question, I'll repeat it. I think it's a combination of both. Maybe the Ignite wasn't the best fit for him, and he's not playing well. All right, when we return, I have a few more questions that I want to answer. One is about Kylan Boswell. Why is he not getting enough love? Another is about who is my favorite sleeper. And then I answer a question about the Spurs options at point guard. And we'll talk about Matas Buzelis and what are my thoughts on him. Stay tuned. But first, I want to talk to you about PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. It is the fastest and the easiest daily sports platform. And it's simple. All you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players, and you decide if they will meet the projected numbers. It's very simple. You're not playing against anyone unless you want to. There is an option for that. But you're just picking the players and the numbers. And on top of that, PrizePicks has a specials league where you can combine players from multiple sports, and you're picking the numbers. So for example, you can say 10.5 points for Travis Kelce and LeBron James. It will be a combination of 3-pointers made and receptions. I mean, that sounds fun. It gives you the opportunity to pick players from multiple sports. And then, like I said, if you want to play against other people, there's another league where you can play against guys like Meek Mill and different celebrities. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. It has to be lowercase. prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. And you can get a first deposit match up to $100. Before I get into the second segment, I wanted to let you know that Locked On Sports Today is a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week streaming channel on YouTube. It is the first of its kind, so big shout out to the Locked On team. So you got to check out Locked On Sports Today. It has daily analysis from the local Locked On experts plus the national show. So check it out, Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Follow, subscribe for the first ever 24/7 streaming platform. All right, second segment. Wanted to talk about Kylan Boswell. And I apologize for my voice. It's a little scratchy right now. I haven't been yelling. I haven't been yelling at animals. I think I'm coming down with some type of chest cold or throat cold. I don't know what it is, but you know, it happens when you're traveling. And then I am sleeping in a tent, and the temperatures aren't the best. I slept in a hoodie all last night. There's no heat in this tent. It's a tent, but it has like wood floors, if that makes sense. So I mean, it has the bathroom. So it's not like, you know, your typical camping tent, but you know, it does have a canvas top, a canvas pointy top, and you know, like I said, it's out here in the safari. It's been a great experience. All right, the next question is about Kylan Boswell, who is Arizona's point guard, and the question is, why isn't Kylan Boswell being talked about enough? I think that's a very valid point. He's on one of the best teams in the country. He's averaging 12 points, a little under 5 assists per game on 52, 50, 100 shooting splits. 52, 50, 100 shooting splits. And Boswell is someone that I think a lot of people thought he was due for a breakout sophomore year. He showed some flashes as a freshman, and he's been as good as advertised. And so I think he's put himself in position to be a first-round pick. But for whatever reason, he's not getting the same love as other point guards. And maybe because he doesn't have the size. He's not as big as Isaiah Collier, who's listed at 6'5". Tyrese Proctor is a bigger point guard. Stephon Castle from UConn is a big point guard. Nikola Topic, who I mentioned earlier, 6'7". So that could have something to do with it, but you can't deny his production and his production on a talented and winning team. Like I said, coming into the season, in my notes, I had that he was a strong guard that loves to push the pace. He impacts the tempo of the game. He passes the ball ahead. He spreads the ball across the floor. He's a shifty ball handler. I'll get to that in a second. He's a shifty ball handler, but there's a catch to it. But he just has good court vision, loves to whip live dribble passes. He's the ultimate playmaker. He's a guy that I think can play 10 years in the NBA. I think he can be a 10-year guy. And last year, the shooting numbers were good. The volume wasn't great, but I thought he showed enough flashes as a shooter where he shot 41% on dribble jumpers, 41% on jumpers off the catch. And then that's translated, even with the increased in production, that he's shooting 52% from three, or 50% from three. So I don't understand why he's not getting the love. And I had someone ask me what's the difference between him and Isaiah Collier, and they kind of broke it down that Collier's bigger, like I mentioned, but he is someone that basically is not a good shooter right now. Boswell is the better shooter of the two. He plays similar but not exactly the same. Both like to push the pace. Both love to play fast, get out on the open court. The difference is with Boswell, even though he has a shifty handle, I think he's more shiftier with his handle than Isaiah Collier. He just doesn't put a lot of pressure on the rim. And so maybe that could be the reason. But as far as like production, I don't think there's that much of a difference. Now, if Collier is the #1 pick and Boswell is projected to go 25, I don't think that there's a 24 spot difference between the two. But Kylan Boswell is off to a really good start, and I'm going to talk about him a little bit later. All right, the next question is, who is your sleeper? Like, who is your guy? Everyone has their guy. I don't have one this year. I know 2 years ago it was Ben Carroll. Last year, Gigi Jackson was my guy that I was really higher on than the consensus. Obviously, I was a lot higher on than the consensus, but I didn't think he would go 45. I don't think talent was the issue there. I just think teams were very concerned about how young he was and if he was mature enough to be ready to be a pro. As far as my guy this year, I don't have one yet. I probably will in January. But the player that I'm thinking could be my guy is Trentyn Flowers. Trentyn Flowers, who's playing down under in the NBL for the Adelaide 36ers. The numbers aren't going to blow you away. He doesn't have like crazy numbers on paper. But hear me out. So at the beginning of the season, he played in the NBL Blitz, and he was pretty bad, to be honest with you. It was an adjustment for a teenager, 18 years old, playing professional. Parker, Jackson Cartwright picked him up full court, just ate his lunch, wouldn't allow him to bring the ball up court. But they were trying him at point guard as a 6'8" point guard. Now, the point guard experience or experiment failed, didn't last long. However, the fact that CJ Bruton believed in Flowers' talent enough to give him the keys as a point guard says that he does have some ability to make plays off the dribble, find guys. So when you're 6'8" and athletic and you have that ability, on top of being a good shooter, you're going to be an alluring prospect for NBA teams. And so with Flowers, he's shooting 41% from three. Again, he's 6'8", good size, he's athletic. I don't want to say he's strong, but he has a frame that is going to be able to put on weight and muscle. He's not like someone that his body is not developed. He's not like a skinny guy by any means. And he's a pretty good slasher. So I like the combination of skills that he'll be able to provide for a team. So I like that. I like his upside, the fact that he's still young. So he may be someone that I shouldn't say maybe. He is someone that I'm higher on than the consensus. I see a lot of mocks have him as a second-round pick. I'm going to put him in my first round because with his, like I said, his size, his shooting, his athleticism, and the upside and the potential that he could be a secondary playmaker is really intriguing to me. So Trentyn Flowers might be my guy. All right, when we return, got one more segment, and I'm going to talk about the San Antonio Spurs. This is a question I've been getting over and over and over. Who are the options for the Spurs? Even though it's still December, we're not even at mid-December yet, but the San Antonio Spurs fans, considering their record, I get it. The Spurs fans are already looking at the 2024 NBA draft. So find out my thoughts on some options for San Antonio and my thoughts on Matas Buzelis. After I talk to you about FanDuel, shout out to FanDuel. FanDuel has been a great sponsor for Locked On. Looking forward to doing more business with FanDuel in the future. And that's because FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL and Locked On. And FanDuel has great offers. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel, the time is right now. And they have great offers on football. And right now, if you're a new customer, if you're a brand new customer, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's it. Any winning $5 bet. That is $150 if your team wins. And with FanDuel, the app is super easy to use. They have different options, including spreads, player props, overs, unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Again, this is the time to join FanDuel. Sign up for FanDuel, the official partner of Locked On and the NFL. Or the official partner of the NFL first, and then Locked On. All right, last segment. So the question I've been getting a lot, like I mentioned, is, and I'll just read it to you. My Spurs need a point guard. Who is the best fit? It depends. You know, like I mentioned, Isaiah Collier is highly touted. He may be the number one pick. But one of the things that is a luxury for San Antonio, based off of the standings today, obviously things could change, is they could have 2 lottery picks. San Antonio could get a first-round pick from the Jakob Porto deal last year with Toronto. And if they get 2 lottery picks, then they could take whoever the best player they feel at number 1 or 2 or wherever they'll be picking, and then they may be able to take a point guard with their second lottery pick. While most people probably want them to obviously take the best player. But let's say, I'm just throwing it out here, you get Alex Sarr at number 1. You know, you pair Wembanyama with another Frenchie, and then you can pick which point guard that you like at the back end, or, you know, somewhere maybe in the middle of the lottery. Or even, I don't know what Toronto's going to end up, but Toronto just looks like they don't have much, or they're kind of struggling with their direction. So the options for San Antonio, a couple names I mentioned earlier, you got Isaiah Collier. Isaiah Collier is just a guy that impacts the game, aggressive driver, is a leader, is an alpha dog. The concern is his shooting. You have Nikola Topic, who is having a phenomenal year in Serbia. He's a big point guard at 6'7". His momentum and draft buzz is, it's going up. I love the fact that he's gotten significantly better over the last few years. Big point guard, loves to get to the rim. Some people have concerns about his shooting. I don't. I think he's going to be fine as a shooter. Shoots a lot of jumpers off the dribble. The biggest issue I have maybe on the defensive end, and I wonder, is it because he's doing so much on offense that they're allowing him to kind of chill a little bit on defense? But I think that's an option. Stephon Castle from UConn is a great option. Big point guard, good passer. I'm actually, I wouldn't say shocked, but I'm encouraged the fact that he came back to play. I think he had I know he had a knee injury. I heard someone say it was a meniscus injury. I'm not totally sure about that, but you got a guy that a lot of people are projecting as a top 10 pick. He could have easily said, you know what, I'm going to protect my stock and let NBA scouts and executives judge me over those 2 games that I played, and I'm going to ride that wave, but he chose to come back. And so I thought that was pretty encouraging. I wonder how it looks if he's not 100% healthy, doesn't look the same. I just wonder how that looks, because sometimes it's hard for teams to unsee what they see. But Castle's an option. And then you have Tyrese Proctor. Proctor's not having the season that I thought he would have, but he has good size. I think he's a good playmaker. I think he's a good shooter. Got off to an absolutely terrible start as a freshman last year, but I think the shooting can't come along. I think he's going to be serviceable. And then here's a wild card for you. Rob Dillingham, the most exciting player. I mean, there's something about when Rob has the ball. It's just pure excitement. And there's quite a few other guys. Carlton Bub Carrington from Pitt, who I think is like the youngest player in the ACC. He has good size. He's a good passer. So the Spurs have options. They have options in the lottery, and they'll have options with an early second-round pick. And I know you probably don't want to be excited about an early second-round pick, but in this draft, which is so wide open, I don't know if there is much of a difference between pick 10 and 40, to be honest with you. Let's just be totally honest. So the Spurs have some options there. They definitely need a point guard. And I imagine one of the names that I mentioned, Reed Shepherd is another name that I'm high on. But I feel like one of the guys that I mentioned will be wearing a San Antonio Spurs uniform next season. All right, the last question is, what are your thoughts on Matas Buzelis? My thoughts on Matas Buzelis. I think he's very talented. I think talent-wise, he may be the most talented player in this draft because of his combination of size, shooting. He's a pretty good athlete, shows some flashes as a passer, was a good shot blocker on the high school level, could be a wing shot blocker, a weak side blocker down the line. Skill-wise, he's got it. Skill-wise, he's got it. Now, I don't know if he is as good of a shooter as advertised, but I think without a doubt he is going to be a 40% shooter from three at some point in his career. If the ball handling, the shooting, all of that comes together, then he could be the best player in this class. My issue with Buzelis is he doesn't always impact games like I think he should. And it's just going off of my opinion. I think he should dominate every game. Maybe not every game in the G League, but I think he should be dominant because he's got the skill. However, sometimes when I watch him play, I see the stats and I'm like, oh, I didn't know he had 15. Oh, I didn't know he had 17. Sometimes the performance is a little bit underwhelming, and he'll get his points. But sometimes I just feel like there are long stretches where it doesn't look like he impacts the game. I think he needs to be a little bit more physical. I think he needs to play a little tougher. Although the injuries haven't been anything major, just talking to different people around the NBA, there's some speculation that he's not going to play a lot in the G League. I mean, I've had one scout tell me 20 games max. And whether that's on him or someone in his camp or agency wanting him to shut it down because they feel like he's not going to be able to showcase his full talent on the Ignite. So, I mean, that's just the opinion of someone else. But my opinion is I think he could be a little bit more tougher. I think he definitely needs to be a better defender. I do think that going forward, you're going to see G League teams attack him, which I think is the right thing to do in a sense. You got a guy that doesn't always embrace physicality. He's younger. The G League is better than ever before. You got some grown men out there with NBA experience. You got guys that were 4 or 5 year, even 6 year college, all conference players. And so I think with his lack of intensity and physicality on the defensive end, and sometimes he has a tendency to not want to mix it up. I think that makes him a target on the defensive end. But if the shooting translates, then I think he's going to be fine. One thing I don't like, and I get it, because he was such a hyped recruit. I just don't think that it's fair to Tyler Smith that Buzelis was inserted into the starting lineup. I mean, Tyler Smith he's been the biggest riser for the Ignite. He's 6'11". He shoots the ball. He's shooting the ball at a high clip. And I mean, I just think that Tyler Smith has earned the right to start, but Buzelis missed a significant amount of time in training camp the last 2 months. I think he played maybe 2 games or 3 games before he was inserted to the starting lineup. And I get it. Maybe if you feel like a player shouldn't lose their starting job from injury, that's fair. But going forward, that's something I'm definitely going to monitor. But overall, I like Buzelis. You know, I thought he was the top 5 pick coming into the season. I don't have him in my top 5 right now, but it could be early. It's probably way too early to say because he's only played 3 games. However, some of the concerns I had have definitely been magnified so far. So that's my thoughts on Matas Buzelis. Well, that wraps up this NBA Big Board podcast. And maybe this is the first NBA Draft podcast recorded in a tent, in a safari or on a safari that is about 50 yards away from hippos. Luckily, I didn't hear any of the hippos. And I'm just yards or feet away from lions and giraffes and zebras. I mean, this has been an exciting adventure. So if you're listening on the podcast, please check out the YouTube version because I'm going to post some of the pictures in the open when I talked about my experience here in Kenya. All right, once again, it's Rafael Barlowe. Thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I am out.